Alien woman chained beneath the sign, "Take as you wish, but only a human," untied her. The lowest tier of Relith spire reeked of heat, coolant, and fried food oil. Vents along the canyon wall hissed steam into the air, staining the sandstone with pale streaks. Crowds surged past market stalls where everything was for sale: scrap metal, boiled roots, stolen tools, bodies. Noise bounced in the narrow space, vendors shouting, children crying, music from a cracked speaker cutting in and out. At the center of the platform, nailed to an iron pillar, a crude sign in 2 languages read, "Take as you wish." Beneath it sat a woman, wrists chained with a length of dull iron. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Her copper-toned skin was streaked with grime, bruises faint on her arms. Silver hair hung loose and matted, clinging to her face in the heat. The wrap around her body was little more than a torn sheet from a market stall, thin, sheer, and barely covering her shoulders and thighs. Her bare feet pressed against tiles so hot they must have burned, yet she didn't move. Her expression wasn't weak. Her chin stayed high, her eyes steady, even as people jeered. She wanted to appear unbroken. Inside, her chest tightened with the same thought over and over. I was thrown here like trash. Her name was Nyril, 29, born to a hybrid family in one of Crith 9's canyon settlements. She'd worked until the collapse of her community left her displaced, broke, and marked as worthless. A vendor had caught her wandering, shoved her under this sign to draw attention, and chained her there to mock the idea of her value. She had refused to beg or cry, even when thirst cracked her lips. That defiance was all she had left. The crowd moved around her like she was nothing. Some slowed to stare, others laughed. No one intervened, until Jonas Hale stopped. He was a human in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, calm in his movements. Dust clung to his cloak and boots. His face carried the lines of long travels and a scar along his jaw. Nothing theatrical, just an old mark of survival. Once, he had been a naval surveyor. Now he worked as a star cartographer for hire, mapping forgotten sectors for trade crews. He wasn't a hero, not a rescuer by nature. He was in Relith Spire on contract, charting transit lanes through unstable desert winds. The job paid enough to cover fuel, maybe enough to leave the canyon world behind. He had no reason to stop, but he did. Jonas stood in front of her, looking first at the lock, then at her face. His presence drew murmurs. Nyril felt her stomach twist, bracing for the same words she'd heard all day. "Go on, human," she whispered, voice dry, brittle. "Everyone else does." His eyes didn't move from hers. No, everyone else looked away. He crouched, pulled a belt tool from his side, and twisted it once. The lock popped open, the chain sliding onto the tiles with a hollow clatter. The crowd reacted with noise, some mocking, some angry. "She's worthless stock," a vendor barked. "Why give up what's free?" another man jeered. Jonas ignored them. He stripped off his cloak, draped it over Nyril's shoulders. She stiffened, confused at the gesture. Cloaks were expensive here, not something given lightly. Heat and exhaustion blurred her thoughts. She tried to guess what he wanted. Surely there was a price. Everyone wanted something. "Up," he said, voice low. Her pride bristled. "Why?" "Because you don't belong under that sign." Nyril's throat tightened. She wanted to laugh, wanted to spit, wanted to believe him. She didn't move until he extended his hand. Not pulling, just offering balance. Slowly, she pushed herself onto her feet. Her legs trembled but held. The cloak dragged behind her. Jonas guided her forward, keeping his body between her and the closest onlookers. They walked through the market. Not quickly, not like thieves. The crowd spat insults after them, but no one blocked their path. He didn't threaten, didn't posture. He carried himself like a man who wouldn't bend if pushed. That was enough to make people step aside. Nyril's heart pounded harder than when she was chained. Freedom was almost worse. It meant risk. It meant not knowing if this man was another trap, another humiliation waiting to unfold. She measured his silence. His face gave nothing away. They left the noise behind and entered a service lane. The air cooled, heavy with condensation from algae pipes. Their footsteps echoed off the stone. Jonas finally let go of her arm. She rubbed her wrists, faint red marks showing where the metal had rested. The sight made anger flare in her chest. Anger at the vendor, at the sign, at herself for being here. Jonas stopped at a door cut into the wall, pulled a key from his belt, and pushed it open. The room inside was small but clean. Charts lined the walls. A table with survey tools filled the center. A cot rested in the corner, neat and simple. It was the kind of room used by men who worked alone and carried order with them. Nyril paused at the threshold, her body tense. Her mind raced. Why here? Why me? She almost turned back into the corridor. Then her legs buckled slightly, reminding her she had no strength left to wander the tears. Jonas stepped aside, holding the door open. Water, food, a place to sit, he said. That's all. She looked at him for a long second, trying to find the lie. His expression didn't change. She stepped inside. For the first time in hours, her body loosened. Not safe. Not yet, but no longer on display. The chain was gone. The sign was behind her. She pulled the cloak tighter around her shoulders, eyes darting to the maps on the walls. A new kind of fear crept in. Fear of hope. Fear of trusting this stranger. Jonas closed the door. He didn't speak again. He moved to the sink, filled a cup, and set it on the table near her. The sound of water hitting metal filled the silence. Nyril stared at the cup, throat aching. She lifted it slowly, suspicious, then drank. The taste was sharp, clean. She set the cup down, hands still shaking, and let her eyes fall back on Jonas. He didn't watch her like prey. He was already pulling bread from a wrapped packet, placing it next to the water. Her thoughts circled one question. Why is he doing this? Jonas's thoughts were simpler. She shouldn't have been there. No one should be there. He knew it wasn't his fight, but leaving her would have meant carrying the image of that sign into every star map he ever drew. And he couldn't live with that. The door shut with a heavy scrape of metal. The sound lingered in the small room like a barrier sealing the noise of the canyon city outside. The sudden quiet pressed in. Nyril stood just inside, her shoulders tense under the borrowed cloak, scanning every detail. The maps pinned on the stone wall, the folded cot, the table crowded with measuring tools and glowing slates. She wanted to understand where she had been brought, and more importantly, why. Jonas didn't sit. He moved straight to the sink, turned the valve, and let water run until it came cold. He filled another cup and set it on the table with a deliberate motion. His silence wasn't hostile, but it wasn't comforting either. He carried himself like a man used to living alone, every action simple, efficient. Nyril's eyes narrowed. What is this place? My quarters, he answered. His voice was calm, stripped of embellishment. I chart star routes. Contracts bring me here. Then why bring me? She let the suspicion harden her tone. Her hands curled in the cloak's fabric, knuckles pale. Jonas didn't look at her right away. He tore open a wrapped packet, set out strips of mushroom flatbread and a wedge of dried root. He pushed the plate closer to her side of the table. Because no one else did. That answer stirred both relief and unease. Relief because it didn't sound like the words of another buyer or tormentor. Unease because she didn't know what kind of man acted out of principle here, in a city where everything had a cost. Her throat burned with thirst. She took the cup, drank slowly, then ate. She chewed as if each bite might vanish if she trusted it too quickly. Jonas didn't press her with questions. He sat at the table, unrolled a chart, and began marking a sector line. His pen scratched against the page. Nyril studied him while she ate. His scar caught the lamplight, his posture straight, even at rest. He wasn't young, wasn't naive. The discipline in his movements told her the rumor must be true. He had once been naval, before turning to cartography. A man like that didn't survive long by being careless. So why risk himself for her? Her chest tightened with a question she didn't want to ask, but couldn't silence. Do you expect something back? Jonas stopped writing, but didn't look up. No, not even gratitude. He shook his head once. I don't need it. She sat back, the cloak sliding lower on one shoulder, revealing the thin strap of her torn wrap beneath. She noticed the way his eyes deliberately stayed on the map. He wasn't pretending she wasn't there, but he wasn't taking what the sign outside had promised. The restraint unsettled her more than hunger had. "Everyone here expects payment," she said, softer this time, as though testing him again. "Food isn't free. Shelter isn't free. Water costs more than blood." Jonas finally raised his eyes. His stare wasn't hard, but steady enough that she couldn't misread it. "Not tonight. Not for me." Her body relaxed a fraction, though she kept her arms crossed, holding the cloak tight. She didn't trust him yet, but something in his tone, flat, final, made her believe he wasn't lying. For a long time, they sat in silence, broken only by the scratch of his pen and the faint drip of the sink. She finished the bread and set the plate down carefully, as if unsure she had the right to leave crumbs. Her thoughts kept circling. Why her? Why him? What did he gain by walking into the crowd and cutting that chain? "Your name?" Jonas asked without looking up. She hesitated. Names were dangerous here. Names carried weight. But refusing felt like ceding power. "Nyril." He nodded once. "Jonas." The exchange hung in the air, small but anchoring. Nyril stepped closer to the wall of maps. The sheets overlapped like scales, each with lines and notes marked in sharp, practiced handwriting. She traced one with her finger, careful not to touch the ink. "You really live for this." "It keeps me moving," Jonas said. He adjusted a ruler, drew another clean stroke. "You could have kept moving when you saw me." "I could have," he said simply. Her stomach twisted. The thought came sharp and unwelcome. If he hadn't stopped, I'd still be there. Maybe worse. That admission burned, but she swallowed it. She turned from the maps, cloak brushing the floor, and met his eyes again. "If I stay here tonight, what happens in the morning?" "You decide," Jonas said. "Leave or stay. I won't chain you." The word chain hit her like a bruise pressed too hard. She looked down at her wrists, faint red marks still visible. The weight of the iron was gone, but the memory sat heavy in her skin. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to believe his promise, but the city outside had trained her to expect betrayal. Jonas rolled the chart closed, set the pen down, and leaned back in his chair. His tone stayed quiet, unforced. "There's the cot. I'll take the floor." That, more than any words, made her hesitate. Men didn't usually give up beds to women like her. He moved with the steady practicality of someone who didn't think of it as a favor, just logistics. That unsettled her even more. Nyril crossed her arms, trying to hide the flicker of relief that threatened to soften her expression. She sat on the cot's edge, cloak wrapped tight, legs drawn close. Jonas spread a roll on the floor without ceremony. He lay down, hand behind his head, and closed his eyes. Nyril sat in the half-dark, staring at the ceiling. Her pulse slowed, but her mind refused to settle. Fear still pricked at her, fear that the door would crash open, that Jonas would shift in the night and prove himself like all the others. And yet, against her own instincts, a quieter thought rose. He might actually mean it. She lay back, cloak pulled around her, eyes still open. She listened to the even rhythm of Jonas's breathing until exhaustion finally dragged her towards sleep. For the first time since she'd been chained under that sign, no one was watching her like she was a thing to take. The absence of threat felt strange, almost unbearable. And in that strangeness, she let herself rest. The first light of the canyon reached the room through the narrow vent grills, a pale strip against the stone wall. The city's noise was already rising outside. Vendors dragging metal shutters open, carts rumbling across uneven tiles, voices clashing. Inside, the air was cooler, touched with the faint damp of condensation pipes. Nyril woke first. Her body tensed automatically, expecting a hand on her arm or a shadow leaning too close. Instead, the room was still. Jonas lay on the floor, his bedroll neat except for the dent where his shoulders rested. One arm was folded under his head, the other resting across his chest. His breathing was steady, untroubled. She watched him for a long moment, cautious, almost disbelieving. Most men didn't sleep like that, not when they thought they had something they could take. If he wanted her, last night would have been the time. He hadn't moved from his place on the floor. Her stomach growled softly, breaking the quiet. She pressed her hand against it, annoyed at the sound. Hunger had become familiar, but here it betrayed her. Jonas stirred, opened his eyes, and sat up without a word. He rubbed his jaw, then pushed himself to his feet. His movements were precise, like a man who had lived too many years with routine. He didn't look surprised to find her awake, only nodded once in acknowledgement. "Water's there," he said, gesturing to the sink. His voice was low, rough from sleep. She rose carefully, still wrapped in the cloak. Her legs felt steadier than the night before. She walked to the sink, splashed water over her face, and let it drip down her neck. The shock of cold cleared the heaviness in her head. She caught her reflection in the faint shine of the metal basin. Hair tangled, eyes rimmed red, but still sharp. Jonas busied himself with a hot plate. He set a dented pot over the burner and poured in a measure of water. "There's Ferland seed coffee," he said. "Not good, but it works." The mention of coffee pulled her gaze. In the market, even the smell of it cost more than most could pay. "You can afford that?" she asked. He gave a short shrug. "Trade routes pay in rations. I don't spend much outside this room." That answer carried more than he said. She studied him, broad shoulders, scar on his jaw, the discipline in his posture. Finally, she asked what had lingered in her head since yesterday. "Why are you here, Jonas? A man with Navy marks doesn't end up on Crith. 9 without a reason." He paused, stirring the pot slowly, and glanced at her. "Contracts. Mapping sectors no one else wants. The work keeps me moving." "That's not an answer," she said flatly. His eyes stayed on her, steady. "I left the Navy because they stopped caring about people. Charts meant fuel costs and patrol routes, not lives. I do the same work now, but for myself. Less pay, fewer lies." The honesty surprised her. She expected deflection, but his tone was plain, without drama. She folded her arms, cloak shifting slightly, and decided he wasn't bragging. He was just stating what had pushed him out here, to the edge of trade. And yesterday, she pressed. Why stop? Why risk being laughed at or worse? Jonas set 2 cups on the table, poured the bitter coffee, and slid one toward her. He met her eyes again. "Because leaving you there would have made me part of it. I don't look away when something's wrong." The simplicity of it unsettled her more than any excuse would have. She sat down slowly, lifted the cup, and sipped. The taste was harsh, earthy, but heat spread through her chest. She set it down carefully. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Narration turned her attention to the wall of maps again. The precision fascinated her. Each line had purpose. Each mark carried weight. She wanted to ask how he learned this craft, how he trusted ink to carry people across space. Instead, another question came first, one she hadn't dared yet. "What happens when someone comes looking for me?" Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Jonas leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Did anyone claim you?" "No," her jaw tightened. "That's why they chained me there. Too worthless to sell, too much trouble to feed. Easier to make a spectacle." His eyes stayed on her face. "Then no one's coming. Except trouble, if you stay visible." The words sank deep. They confirmed what she already knew, but hated to admit. Still, hearing it from him made it more real. She clenched her hands under the table, nails digging into her palms. Jonas shifted the map closer, picked up a pen, and drew a clean line across a chart. "I can't change the city," he said quietly, "but I can give you a place where you decide what happens." The offer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sweet. It was steady, like the man himself. And it left her torn, between the instinct to run from any promise and the part of her that wanted to believe she had more than one day left. She took another sip of coffee, eyes fixed on him over the rim. He didn't flinch. He just waited. The Canyon City had already reached full volume by midday, but inside Jonas's quarters the sound came through muted, distant calls from vendors, the groan of lift engines, the hiss of coolant vents. The room itself stayed still, the only motion the sweep of Jonas's pen as he marked new coordinates onto a fresh chart. Narration stood beside him, her arms folded across her chest. She had finished the last bite of flatbread an hour ago, and now her hunger was replaced with restless energy. She couldn't stop circling the room, studying every detail of his maps and tools. She wanted to understand what kind of man lived this way, so clean, so ordered, so private. Finally, she broke the silence. "You said you chart routes." For who? Freight crews, miners, small traders who can't afford guild contracts. He didn't pause in his work. They pay for accuracy. I give them lines they can trust. Why trust you, she asked. Why not someone licensed? Because guild maps aren't updated. They use old data and ignore risks. He lifted the pen, tapped one corner of the chart. I don't ignore risks. She tilted her head, watching his calm precision. Part of her wanted to call him a liar. Men always shape their stories to look better. But another part, sharper and harder, recognized the discipline in his movements. This wasn't performance. This was habit carved over years. She stepped closer, one hand brushing over the rolled charts pinned to the wall. Teach me, she said suddenly. Jonas looked at her for the first time in hours. You want to learn cartography? I want to know the work that keeps you alive, she said flatly. If I stay here another night, I won't just sit in the corner waiting. He studied her for a long moment, then slid a clean sheet onto the table. He placed a light pen across it and gestured to the chair opposite. Sit, she sat, pulling the cloak tighter around her body. He guided her hand to the ruler, showing how to line the edge with the grid. His touch was steady, firm, not lingering. Pressure here, not too hard. Draw with your arm, not your wrist. Her first stroke wobbled. She scowled. That's useless. Try again, he said. The second line held straighter. By the third, it matched his exactly. He gave a single nod. Better. She caught the nod, the quiet acknowledgement. It felt heavier than praise. Her lips twitched before she forced her expression back to neutral. You don't smile much, do you? Not often, he admitted. Why not? Because it doesn't change anything, he said, turning back to his own map. Her eyes lingered on him, searching for cracks. She wanted to find weakness, arrogance, some sign that he was the same as the rest. Instead, all she found was patience, and that unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. By late afternoon, Jonas suggested they leave the room. You'll need more than bread, he said. We'll go to the lower stalls. Her pulse spiked. The thought of stepping back into the streets made her stomach knot. Faces would remember her. Words would follow. Still, she couldn't deny the need. She pulled the cloak tighter, adjusted the hem to hide her bare legs, and walked at his side. The lower market was dense with bodies, the smell of grilled root mash and boiled algae thick in the air. Nyril felt every eye on her, even when people pretended not to look. Her skin prickled with heat and memory. Jonas moved with deliberate calm, his shoulders clearing a path without force. When a water hawker tried to step into their way, pushing a crude joke about charity work, Jonas turned his head just enough to meet the man's eyes. No, he said, voice flat, unshaken. The hawker faltered, stepped back, and didn't speak again. Nyril kept her face impassive, but inside a sharp mix of fear and satisfaction twisted her chest. She wasn't used to a man cutting insults short with only a word. It made her wonder, how far would he go if pressed harder? They bought supplies, varan roots, dried larn fruit, a pouch of frozen seeds. Jonas handled the exchanges quickly, without haggling. He didn't look at Nyril when she kept her head lowered, but he stayed close enough that she never felt exposed. Back inside the quarters, she dropped the bundle on the table with a sharp exhale, as if releasing all the tension she'd carried outside. Why didn't they stop us? She asked suddenly. Jonas unpacked the food with steady hands. Because they're cowards, he said. They like easy targets. You're not an easy target with me next to you. The words should have sounded like pride, but they didn't. They sounded like fact, plain and certain. That steadiness dug under her skin. She leaned against the wall, watching him. Her voice came low, edged with suspicion. You don't touch me. You don't ask me for anything. What? He set down the knife he was using to cut the roots and finally met her gaze. Because you're not mine to take. Her chest tightened. She didn't want to feel relief at those words, but she did. At the same time, they scared her. Because if he truly meant it, then the choice would fall to her. And choice was something she hadn't trusted herself with in years. The silence stretched. She pulled the cloak tighter again, hiding the sudden flush on her skin. For the first time, she wondered if staying here wasn't just survival, but the start of something she couldn't yet name. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the hot plate and the distant echo of canyon lifts grinding up the tiers. The smell of cooked Varan root still hung in the air. Jonas sat at the table, maps spread out in careful order, a pen balanced between his fingers. Nyril leaned across from him, elbows propped on the surface, studying him with an intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like pressure. She had eaten her fill for the first time in days, and the food left her restless. Her body felt steadier now, her thoughts clearer, and with clarity came suspicion. He had given her food, water, a bed. He had walked her through the streets without taking advantage, without even asking for gratitude. The longer he stayed steady, the more she needed to test him. "You really live like this?" she asked, gesturing at the maps pinned to the wall. "No company, no family, just ink and lines." Jonas didn't look up from the chart he was marking. "It's enough, is it?" she pressed. Her tone sharpened, meant to provoke. "You eat alone, sleep alone, drink your bitter coffee alone. Doesn't it bother you?" He lifted his eyes, finally, meeting hers across the table. His face was unreadable, calm as stone. Better alone than surrounded by liars. The bluntness caught her off guard. She leaned back in the chair, silent for a moment. He returned to his work, the pen scratching across the chart. The sound grated on her nerves. She reached for a ruler lying near his hand. Her fingers brushed his. The contact lingered longer than necessary. Jonas froze, eyes flicking down at the touch, then back to the map. He didn't pull away, but he didn't move closer either. "You're disciplined," she said quietly. "Too disciplined. Better than careless," he replied. "Or maybe afraid?" She countered, her voice low, deliberate. He set the pen down, slowly, as if making a decision. His eyes locked on hers, steady and unflinching. "You think I'm afraid of you?" Her lips curved, faintly. "Maybe." Every man in that market knew exactly what the sign meant. "But you walk me out, put me in your room, and then act like you don't see me. That doesn't look like strength. That looks like fear." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. She wanted to see what he'd do, if he'd crack, if he'd prove himself like the rest. Jonas leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. He was close enough now that she could see the scar running along his jaw, the small lines at the corners of his eyes. His voice stayed low, calm, controlled. "Don't mistake restraint for fear. If I wanted you, I wouldn't hide it. But I won't take what isn't given." Heat rose in her chest, unexpected, unwelcome. She dropped her eyes to the map, tracing the edge of the ruler with her fingertip. His words carried weight because he meant them. And if he meant them, then the choice was hers. That realization unsettled her more than chains ever had. She picked up the pen, tested its weight. "Show me," she said, her tone steadier now. "Show me how to draw it right." Jonas slid the map closer, guiding her hand with his. His palm rested lightly against hers, firm enough to steady, light enough to retreat if she pulled away. She didn't. Together they drew a line across the grid, the ink smooth and straight. "Better," he murmured. Her throat tightened at the word. She wanted him to look at her, to betray some crack in that calm. He didn't. His focus stayed on the page. That calm was infuriating and intoxicating. When she pulled her hand back, her fingertips brushed his again, slower this time. She saw the flicker in his eyes. Just a second, just enough. Her lips curved slightly, not in mockery, but in something closer to satisfaction. "You're not afraid," she said softly. "Good." Jonas leaned back, folding his arms. He didn't answer, but his jaw was set, his breathing measured. The room felt heavier now, the silence charged. Nyril stood, cloak slipping down one shoulder, and walked to the cot. She didn't look back. She sat, legs crossed, eyes fixed on him. "I'll sleep here again," she said, voice calm, almost daring. Jonas met her gaze, nodded once, and began rolling up the maps. His discipline held, but the air between them had shifted. For the first time since she had been chained under that sign, Nyril felt not just survival, but tension, raw, dangerous, alive. The night air inside the room was warmer than the one before. The walls held the heat from the canyon's sun, and the faint hum of coolant pipes did little to soften it. Jonas sat at the table, Maps rolled and stacked, his arms folded across his chest. His eyes stayed on the corner of the room, but his thoughts refused to settle. Nyril was on the cot again, this time without the cloak. She wore only the oversized shirt he had given her, the hem brushing her thighs as she shifted on the mattress. She didn't lie down right away. She sat with her back against the wall, legs bent, eyes fixed on him. The silence was different tonight. Not tense, not suspicious. Testing. Waiting. "You don't sleep much," she said quietly. "I sleep enough," Jonas answered. His voice carried no irritation, only fact. "Enough for what? Another empty day? Another chart no one thanks you for?" He turned his head, finally meeting her eyes. "Enough to do the job. That's all I need." She studied him. Her heartbeat was faster than she wanted him to notice, but she didn't look away. "You talk like a man who's already decided he doesn't deserve more." The words struck him harder than he let show. He didn't reply. His jaw tightened slightly, his breathing steady but deeper. Nyril leaned forward, her hair falling over one shoulder. "I asked you yesterday what you wanted from me. You said nothing. I don't believe that. I don't take what isn't given," Jonas said firmly, echoing the night before. Her lips curved faintly. She stood, crossed the small room, and stopped in front of the table. The shirt hung loose, the lamplight outlining her form through the fabric. She placed her hands flat on the table, leaning forward until her face was level with his. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then what if I give it?" Jonas's pulse kicked hard. His eyes stayed locked on hers, not the shirt, not the skin beneath. "Then it's your choice," he said, the words heavy, controlled. She studied him for another long moment, searching for hesitation, weakness, hunger that would betray him. What she found instead was restraint, real, disciplined, almost infuriating. That steadiness made her decision sharper. Her hand slid across the table until it brushed his. The touch was deliberate, slow. This time he didn't freeze. His fingers curled lightly around hers, not pulling, not pressing. A silent acknowledgement. Nyril drew closer. The heat from her body met his across the narrow gap. "I don't want chains," she said low, almost trembling. "I don't want debt. I want to choose." Jonas rose from the chair in one smooth motion. He didn't lunge, didn't grab. He stood, taller, his presence filling the space between them. His hand lifted, brushing a strand of her hair back behind her ear. The gesture was careful, almost reverent. "Then choose," he said, his voice quieter than ever. Her chest tightened, breath caught. She had expected resistance, or force, or another test to endure. Not this. She stepped into him, pressed her lips to his. The kiss was steady, certain, without hesitation. Jonas answered it slowly, letting her set the pace. His hands settled at her waist, firm enough to hold, gentle enough to let her pull away if she wanted. She didn't pull away. The cot was 2 steps behind her. They moved there together, unhurried, each step deliberate. She lay back, pulling him down with her, her eyes open and steady. There was no shame, no bargaining, no fear. Only choice. The lamplight painted their bodies in gold, the canyon night pressing close around the small room. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't about suspicion or restraint. It was about permission and the kind of freedom that chains could never take away. When it was over, they didn't speak. Nyril rested with her head against his chest, breathing even, eyes half closed. Jonas held her, his hand moving slowly over her hair. Both of them knew the balance had shifted. The room felt different now. Not just a shelter, but the beginning of something claimed, not taken. Outside, the city's noise rumbled on. Inside, for the first time, both of them slept without fear. The room was still when Nyril stirred, faint light creeping in through the vent slats. Her head rested against Jonas's chest, the rise and fall of his breathing steady beneath her. For a moment, she didn't move. The scent of him, metal, dust, and faint coffee, lingered in the fabric of his shirt that she still wore. Her mind wanted to brace for regret, but her body felt calm, anchored. She hadn't expected calm. Jonas opened his eyes, not startled, just present, as if he had been awake already. He looked down at her without speaking. His hand, resting at her side, stayed still. He didn't shift away, didn't cover what they'd shared with awkwardness. "You're quiet," she said softly. "I usually am," he replied. Her lips curved faintly, almost amused. She sat up, pulling the shirt around her thighs, and studied his face in the half-light. He watched her without possession, only acknowledgement. That unsettled her more than anything. No demand, no assumption, no claim. She ran her thumb over the faint marks still on her wrists. "If word spreads, if someone recognizes me." Jonas sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the cot. "Then I make it clear you're not to be touched." His tone was flat, calm, but absolute. "Like property?" she asked, testing him. "Like a partner," he answered, looking directly at her. "Not owned, chosen." The words sank deeper than she expected. She searched his face for irony, but there was none. He stood, crossed to the table, and pulled a form from the stack of registry sheets. He set it down, tapped the space marked crew member. "I have a license," he explained. "One navigator, one coach artist. I can add your name." Nyril blinked, caught off guard. "You would put me on your record? Share or pay?" "Yes," he said, as if it were obvious. "If you're with me, you're not hidden. You're written down." Her throat tightened. She had expected secrecy, maybe even shame, not this kind of blunt recognition. "You don't even know if I can chart." "You learned faster than I did," he replied. "That's enough." She stared at the blank line on the form. Her chest felt heavy, torn between disbelief and a fierce, unfamiliar spark of hope. For years, she had been treated as something to discard. Now, with one steady offer, he was rewriting her place in the world. "Write it," Jonas said quietly, pushing the pen toward her. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She scrawled her name, Nyril, onto the sheet. The ink bled slightly on the cheap paper, but it was there, black and permanent. When she set the pen down, her hand shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. Jonas rolled the form, slid it into a case, and set it aside. "It's official when I file it. After that, no vendor or officer can call you worthless again." Her chest rose sharply. She turned away, pacing to the wall, her hands pressed to her temples. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she admitted, voice raw. "For being seen again. For belonging anywhere." Jonas leaned back against the table, arms crossed, watching her. "You don't have to be ready now. You just have to decide if you want it." She stopped, looking at him. His steadiness didn't waver, not even now. It burned against her doubt, steady as the scar on his jaw. She realized then that his restraint wasn't distance. It was discipline, the same discipline that had carried him through empty sectors and abandoned posts. He had chosen to share it with her. She crossed the room, stood in front of him, and set her hand on his chest. Her voice was low, almost trembling. "Then I choose it. Not because you offered. Because I want to." Jonas's hand covered hers, warm, solid. "Then it's done." The noise of the city rose outside, a chorus of trade calls and machinery. But inside the room, there was only the two of them and the line she had just signed. For the first time since the chains, Nyril felt something return to her that she thought was gone forever: dignity. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her without hesitation. They stood that way in the small room carved into stone, the maps and charts surrounding them like silent witnesses. Jonas broke the quiet at last. "When the next shuttle lifts, we'll be on it. Not running. Leaving." Nyril closed her eyes, letting the words settle. She pictured the sign, the jeers, the iron pillars shrinking behind them, until it was nothing but a memory. For the first time in years, she believed she might have a future. Morning came slowly, filtered through the vent grills in thin bands of pale light. The air smelled faintly of steam and metal dust drifting in from the canyon. Nyril woke first, sitting upright on the cot, Jonas's shirt still loose on her frame. Her hair, silver and tangled, fell across her shoulders. For a moment she sat still, unsure if the calm inside her chest was real. The night before hadn't been a dream. His steady touch, her choice, the silence that had followed. It was all real. That frightened her more than the chain ever had. Jonas moved behind her, rising from the floor where his roll still lay. He stretched once, joints stiff, then looked at her. No hesitation, no awkwardness. Just steady presence. "You slept," he said, his voice low. "I did," she admitted. It felt strange to say it aloud, like confessing something fragile. Jonas busied himself at the table, pulling a folded form from a stack of papers. He laid it flat and smoothed it with his hand. The sheet bore the insignia of the Cartographers Guild. "You asked what happens now," he said. "This." A name added. A new registration. Niral's brows knit. "Mine." "Yes." "Coach artist. Crew share. Legal partner." She stared at the blank line he pointed to. Her pulse quickened. No one had ever spoken her name alongside words like partner or legal. For years, her existence had been reduced to scraps. Useful one day, disposable the next. Now he was offering permanence, ink on paper, something no jeer or vendor could erase. "Why risk it?" she asked quietly. "The guild could flag me. Someone could remember." Jonas met her eyes. His voice carried the weight of certainty. "Because I won't call you a shadow. If you're with me, you're not hidden." Her throat tightened. She reached for the pen, hand trembling. For a second she froze, afraid of what it meant. Then, slowly, she wrote her name, Niral. The letters wavered slightly, but they stood dark on the page. She dropped the pen and pressed her palms to the table, steadying herself. Jonas rolled the form, slipped it into a case, and set it with his charts. Filed at Tier 12, it becomes law. Niral paced to the wall, fingers brushing one of his maps. Her voice came low, almost raw. "If I sign this, if I leave with you, there's no going back." Jonas stood, crossing the room, closing the distance. "There's nothing back there worth returning to." She turned, searching his face. His expression was calm, unshaken. That steadiness made her chest ache with something unfamiliar, hope mixed with fear. "And if I fail you? If I can't live up to that line on your paper?" "Then you fail beside me," he said simply. "Not alone." Her breath caught. He wasn't promising perfection, only presence. That, more than anything, felt like the freedom she had been denied. Niral stepped close, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. His arms wrapped around her, strong and unyielding. For the first time since the iron chain had clattered at her feet, she felt the weight lift. She was no longer marked as worthless, no longer trapped beneath a sign that mocked her existence. She was choosing. Outside, the city clattered on, voices rising, machines grinding. But inside the stone room, she rested against Jonas. And for once, she let herself believe in tomorrow. He spoke against her hair, quiet but firm. "When the next shuttle lifts, we'll be on it. We're done with Crith 9. Her lips curved faintly. "Then take me to the stars you keep drawing on these walls." Jonas nodded once. Together, the words settled between them, heavier than any chain, but it felt nothing like captivity. It felt like freedom finally given shape. The Tier 12 registry office smelled of dust and stale ink. The walls were lined with cracked screens, most long dead, and a clerk sat behind a steel counter, stacked with ledgers. His eyes barely lifted when Jonas set the rolled form on the desk. "Registration. 2 chartists," Jonas said. His tone left no room for small talk. The clerk unrolled the sheet, reading the names. Jonas shifted the map closer, picked up a pen, and drew a clean line across a chart. "I can't change the city," he said quietly, "but I can give you a place where you decide what happens." The offer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sweet. It was steady, like the man himself. And it left her torn, between the instinct to run from any promise and the part of her that wanted to believe she had more than one day left. She took another sip of coffee, eyes fixed on him over the rim. He didn't flinch. He just waited. The Canyon City had already reached full volume by midday, but inside Jonas's quarters the sound came through muted, distant calls from vendors, the groan of lift engines, the hiss of coolant vents. The platform swayed with heat rising from the canyon below. Neon signs flickered overhead, fighting against the harsh sun. A crowd of miners, traders, and vendors waited for boarding, shoulders pressed tight, voices low. Niral felt their stares. Some recognized her from the lower tiers. She caught the whispers, "Market girl," the chained one. Her throat tightened, but she didn't lower her head. Not this time. Jonas walked at her side, his presence enough to part the whispers into silence. He carried himself with the same calm authority that had cut through the jeers in the market. His hand brushed hers once, not a claim, but a steady reminder. She gripped it back. At the gate, a pair of registry officers checked documents. Jonas handed over their papers. The officers scanned them, eyes moving between the names and their faces. He hesitated for a second too long on Narration. She stared back, unflinching, until he stamped the clearance code and waved them through. Inside the shuttle cabin, the seats were narrow, the air heavy with recycled coolant. They found a place near the viewport. Narration pressed her hand to the cold glass, looking out at the canyon city one last time. The tiers rose above each other like broken shells, smoke drifting from vents, neon flashing against sandstone. And somewhere down there, the iron pillars still stood with its painted sign, waiting for another life to be chained beneath it. Her jaw tightened. "I don't ever want to see this place again." "You won't," Jonas said. His hand rested on her thigh, firm, steady. Engines roared beneath them, shaking the cabin. The shuttle lifted, rising past the tiers, past the waterfall of coolant, past the roofs and neon wires. The city shrank below, its noise replaced by the steady thrum of ascent. Naration's heart pounded as the canyon walls fell away and the horizon opened wide. For the first time, she saw the sky of Crith, 9 without the city pressing against it. It was vast, sharp blue at the edges, blackening as the shuttle climbed. Stars flickered faintly beyond the veil of atmosphere. She leaned against Jonas's shoulder, her voice barely audible. "It feels like the chains finally broke." "They did," he said, eyes on the stars ahead. Minutes later, the shuttle pierced the last layer of cloud, the planet's curve visible in the viewport. Darkness spread across the glass, scattered with countless lights. Jonas's maps were no longer lines on paper. They were out there, waiting. Narration turned her face to him, her amber eyes steady. "You said I could choose. I chose this. I'm not going back." Jonas brushed his thumb across her knuckles, his expression calm but certain. "Then we start from here. Together." She rested her head on his shoulder, watching the stars grow brighter. The world that had chained her was shrinking behind them, no larger than a memory. Ahead was only the uncharted, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. The shuttle climbed higher, engines humming, until Crith, 9 was nothing but a scarred surface below. 2 names sat side by side on a registry sheet. 2 lives now written into the stars. And in that cabin, beneath the endless sky, Narration closed her eyes and allowed herself something she hadn't in years: peace. The story ended there, without chains, without jeers. Only freedom and the quiet certainty of a future chosen.